Pharaonic Village. The Pharaonic Village. The idea of the Pharaonic Village started with a dream, where Dr. Hassan Ragab thought of creating a living museum that would include real people dressed in pharaonic clothes and embodying ancient Egyptian life. Therefore, in 1974, Dr. Hassan Ragab began transforming Jacob Island into a very similar model for the life of the ancient Egyptians. The first step was to plant nearly 5,000 trees around the village to obscure the appearances of modern Cairo. The first of those trees were willow trees, sycamores, date palms, and he was traveling. Dr. Ragab began cultivating plants in the Egyptian soil, which served as her homeland for thousands of years. Dr. Hassan was interested in the most important details about the life of the ancient Egyptian and was looking for answers to the questions that no answer to her. Shows of the life of the ancient Egyptian farmer in the Pharaonic Village. The wheel of work began to turn in the village. The noble's house and garden, a market, a large field for cultivation and harvest, a place for boats, roads, farms, and in the middle a huge white stone temple were established, which then turned into the emblem of the Pharaonic Village. In 1984, Dr. Hassan Ragab opened officially the Pharaonic Village after a 10-year work at a cost of more than $6 million. In 1989, Dr. Abd al-Salam joined his father and participated in the management of the village. Dr. Abd al-Salam Rajab confirmed that the village was not completed, but it is in the development stage, as some years have passed since the opening of the village, and a model for the tomb of Tutankhamun has been opened, which has become the only refuge to see the cemetery for the incapable. On visiting Luxor. In addition, Dr. Abdul Salam has opened many museums, 12 museums, which showcased many stages of Egypt's modern history. Therefore, the village began to grow and transform into a place with a luminous history. The idea of the Pharaonic Village is based on bringing the visitor closer to the ancient Egyptian times. At the beginning of his visit, the visitor passes by representatives who wear the pharaonic costume and imitate it in the manufacture of papyrus, hunting, drawing, sculpture, agriculture, mummification, and so on. Journey to the past. The trip begins by entering the village and buying tickets from the ticket office at the gate, then the reception buoy. It contains a small cafeteria to receive visitors and an exhibition of some archaeological and pharaonic products. On the top floor of the reception buoy there is the Cleopatra Museum, where the tour guide explains to you about the reign of Cleopatra and Julius Caesar, and the conflict that took place in that era. After seeing the Cleopatra Museum, your journey begins inside the village since you board the floating boat. The methods of manufacturing it and converting it into paper, an overview of mummification methods, papermaking, pottery, glass and weapons, information about the methods of agriculture, irrigation and hunting at the pharaohs, and methods of drawing and hieroglyphic writing. All this information you hear and watch representative scenes that mimic the past, to bring the picture closer and simulate the life of the ancient Egyptians and all the details of their lives. Museums in the Pharaonic Village. The most distinctive feature of the Pharaonic Village after the trip by boat is the various museums that deal with all the history of ancient and modern Egypt. And the Coptic Museum, the Mummification Museum, the Museum of Modern Egypt, the Napoleon Museum and the Cleopatra Museum, each of which deals with a historical era and is supported by pictures and miniatures of the most important events, battles, clothes and tools used during that era of Egypt's history. President Jamal Abdul Nasser Museum. Jamal Abdul Nasser Antiques is a museum that deals with the life of the late Egyptian President Jamal Abdul Nasser from his birth until his death in the early 70s. The museum is located in the Pharaonic Village on the banks of the Nile. The museum contains more than 170 rare pictures of President Jamal Abdul Nasser in the various stages of his life. Abdul Nasser during 1941 and 1942. In addition to the text of the decision to nationalize the Suez Canal on July 26, 1956, his abdication speech on June 9, 1956, and the medical report on Nasser's death. Museum of former President Muhammad Anwar Sadat. The museum contains a large collection of personal belongings, pictures, and some personal belongings that Mrs. Jihan Sadat gifted to the museum, such as his marine suit, in which he attended the opening ceremony of the Suez Canal, his own jacket, his famous stick, toothpaste, toothbrush and perfume. It also contains a collection of rare memorial photos of Sadat on different occasions, including the picture of his wives and children, and during moments of reflection on his life, such as a picture of his resting place in the pyramid and a picture of him performing ablution and praying. Al-Ramli, and pictures of him with the most important international figures during the signing of the famous peace agreement at Camp David. Mummification Museum. It contains some examples of the mummification process and the most important deities associated with the idea of mummification, and the Pyramids Museum, which represents the idea of building the pyramid, the most important tools used in its construction, obelisks, etc. Tutankhamun's tomb. The village built a model of the tomb of the same size and design, as well as models of all the artifacts that were discovered, placed in the same order in which they were found when the tomb was discovered. Of the king's belongings such as the throne chair. As for the second room, it contains some pottery and a box in which the king's weapons were found, and the Senate game, which is similar to a game of chess. Treasures, where some of the king's treasures and some of his belongings were found, as well as the god Anubis, the god of mummification, whose job was to protect the cemetery. First-class Pharaonic tour. One of the most beautiful and enjoyable parts of the trip was the tour inside the house of the noble or rich man of the pharaohs, and the tour inside the house of the poor man, for even the days of the pharaohs, Egypt did not know social justice. And a large area in front of the house, while the poor man's house is from one room, and his poor wife sits to grind wheat and prepare flour for long hours, while the rich man's wife spends all her time listening to the harp and applying cosmetics. Some fun for the kids. Inside the village there is an arts center, in which some artistic activities are held, such as art workshops for glass, pottery and papyrus making. There is also a place dedicated to games, such as mini amusements, where young people can play if they are bored of watching the various museums, and there is also a specialized center for photography. Village products. Part of the tour inside the Pharaonic Village includes visiting the market and the bazaar, which offers many different pharaonic goods and products, which visitors eagerly accept, as well as the village studio, where they can photograph you in pharaonic clothes and in a pharaonic atmosphere. And photography is not allowed inside the bazaar or the studio, and there is also a section dedicated to the Pharaonic market selling glass products, perfumes, copper and leather products, sand painting, henna drawings, and some traditional and pharaonic artifacts.